Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to deconstructing foods from Chinese American cuisine with a shot at yet another dish from the Panda Express menu, which is their Honey Walnut Shrimp. For those unfamiliar in this series, we have been taking apart classically Americanized dishes from Chinese American cuisine to identify what their Americanized qualities are, and then reassembling them through the lens of more traditional Chinese wok cooking. This, of course, is always super fun for me to do with dishes that are obviously quite Americanized like Honey Walnut Shrimp, because they are pretty much entirely an American creation, which leaves a lot of fun room for interpretation and creativity. For those unfamiliar, the Panda Express Honey Walnut Shrimp is a fairly classic interpretation of the dish, featuring a tempura battered shrimp and candied walnut that have been tossed in a sweet and creamy glaze of honey, mayonnaise, and condensed milk. And if it wasn't obvious already, the mayonnaise and condensed milk are purely American additions here because Chinese people don't eat dairy and mayonnaise is, an American classic. For our version today, we're going to be sticking fairly true to the original with a candied walnut and a tempura battered shrimp, done with glutinous rice flour for a slightly chewier and more dense quality to the shrimp. But then we'll also be opening things up a little bit with some savory umami and heat coming from the addition of some sweet chili sauce and chili crisp oil that you probably won't see in a more classic honey walnut shrimp. Okay, so let's get into it. Alright, so kicking things off here, I'm starting with the big three aromatic veggies that you'll likely see come up in almost all Woo Can Cook Chinese recipes, which are 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger, and then the whites of 3 green onions, which we're slicing thinly, with the reserved greens sliced thinly on a bias and set aside for our finishing garnish later on. Those who have been following this series for a while hopefully should know by now that we often start with these 3 elements because their aromatic qualities work really well as the fundamentals of umami that we build on top of in a lot of Chinese stir-fries. Then moving on, we're taking a look at our main event of the day today, which is our shrimp. This is about 1 pound of the frozen stuff, which I absolutely stand by because shrimp freezes and defrosts really well and also spoils very quickly if you purchase the fresh stuff. We're removing the shells and tails here, then using a paring knife to slice open the underside of the shrimp so that we may remove its poop vein, and yes, I'm pretty sure that's the technical name for it. Anyway, moving on to our glaze here, I'm starting off with the prerequisite ingredients that pretty much have to be included in order for this to be a honey walnut shrimp, which are a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise followed by a single tablespoon of condensed milk and 2 tablespoons of honey. This is where those signature sticky, thick, and creamy qualities that you know and love are gonna come from today. Now, in your more traditional honey walnut shrimp, our glaze would pretty much stop right here, which gives the shrimp its iconically white color in plating. Personally, I've always found that this dish is a little bit too sweet for my tastes, almost like a dessert dish. So to help open things up a little bit, I'm rounding out that honey with 2 additional tablespoons of sweet chili sauce for a slightly more complex sweetness, followed by 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar for some brightness, and finally my personal favorite, a single tablespoon of Laoganma chili crisp oil, whose subtle heat is going to give us just the right amount of savory umami without throwing the whole thing out of whack. Moving on to our tempura batter here, I'm starting off with 4 egg whites, which as always should be done over 3 separate bowls. The first bowl is to catch our egg whites, then the second is to deposit our yolks, and finally the third is to hold our successfully separated whites. We're adding this extra step here because if for whatever reason you f*** it up like this, you won't have to start all over. Next up, we're ignoring these glaring visual inconsistencies once again with 2/3 cup each of glutinous rice flour and soda water. That glutinous rice flour today is going to be a little bit thicker and more toothsome than your more common AP flour or cornstarch batters would be. It also, by the way, inadvertently makes this dish gluten-free, so if that's your game, this honestly might be the first time that we've done a Chinese dish that doesn't contain gluten because there's gluten in soy sauce. Then next, we're mixing this all to combine until a smooth batter forms, then adding in our shrimp, tossing everything to coat, and setting this aside while we move on to our walnuts next. I'm starting this off by dissolving half a cup of brown sugar with equal parts of water in a larger bowl because I don't know why I picked such a comically small bowl for this purpose. Then over on the stove, I'm bringing our sugar-water mixture to a boil before adding in half a cup of walnuts and letting this reduce for about 5 minutes. Then I'm removing it all from heat, straining off the excess water, and setting our walnuts out to dry for 30 minutes while we move on to our shrimp next. Over on the stove, I'm bringing 24 ounces of high heat neutral oil to 350 degrees F. Then I'm adding my shrimp about 10 pieces at a time for our double fry. Now, it has been a little while since we've done a double fry, so a quick refresher here. The double fry method is essentially par frying our shrimp in a brief initial cook for about 2 minutes until lightly golden, then removing, letting it cool, reheating the oil, and repeating for a second additional cook for about 5 minutes until deeply golden brown. The initial first fry helps to burn off the excess moisture present in our shrimp, which allows for the energy of our second fry to be dedicated entirely to creating a crispier exterior quality rather than burning off liquid. Occasionally you might notice that I do skip the double fry method when I think that I can get away without it because it does add extra time to your cook. This took me an extra 10 minutes or so today. But in the case of a tempura batter where there is obviously quite a bit of liquid present, I think it is actually fairly essential for a crispy fry. I'm repeating this with my remaining shrimp. This took me 2 batches or 4 fries altogether. Then we're moving on to our wok fry next. Back over on the stove, I've removed my fryer oil, wiped down the wok, reheated as hot as possible, and then we're adding 4 more tablespoons of peanut oil to the wok. And as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then going in first here are my aromatics. Here's my garlic, ginger, and the whites of my green onions going in. We're tossing this for about 15 seconds until fragrant, then adding in our glaze next, plus an additional 1/4 cup of water or so to buy us a little bit of time on heat. We're letting this simmer and reduce for quite a while. This was on heat for about 5 minutes or so. We want our glaze to be very reduced before adding in that shrimp, or else we'll end up with some soggy shrimp, which would be a real shame after all of the work that we just did with that double fry. So here's my fully reduced glaze, which has reduced by about 40% or so. Then going in next are my cooled tempura shrimp, followed by my candied walnuts. Then next I'm killing the heat and giving this all a very brief toss to combine before removing from heat entirely. Finally, I'm serving this all over rice, finishing with the greens of my green onions, and we're ready to eat. Alright, so as you might have noticed, this does not look like your more classic or traditional honey walnut shrimp, mainly because the color is way off, but also because the creaminess of that glaze has been toned down here quite a bit. So if that is what you're looking for, this really isn't it. That said though, I will say that this was really tasty, and if our goal was to tone down the American qualities of this dish, then I think we did so fairly successfully without straying from the original too dramatically. Our shrimp has a really wonderful crispy yet also toothsome quality to it from that glutinous rice flour, and pairs really nicely with the delicate nature of our shrimp. Then our candied walnuts are a nice crunchy contrast and give the whole dish a wonderfully protein-rich element to make it a super hearty meal as well. Like I mentioned before, my personal gripe with honey walnut shrimp is that it is always excessively sweet, which is a little bit off-putting when paired with the creamy nature of mayonnaise and condensed milk. So I thought that the inclusion of that Laoganma chili crisp oil and the sweet chili sauce really helped to cut through the intense sweetness nicely and let that mayonnaise function as more of a supporting element rather than the more intense presence that it often has in a more traditional honey walnut shrimp. If you're looking for a fun way to shake up this really classic Chinese American dish, definitely give this one a shot. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series that we've been doing that's dedicated to reproducing a lot of classic Chinese American dishes, including a whole bunch of stuff that comes from the Panda Express menu, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet, because there's a lot of these. For the Bay Area locals, the Wu Can Cook pop-up has a brand new location every Friday at Federation Brewing in Oakland, so come by and say hi if you can. More about that at wucancook.com/eats. Finally, for those who have been watching for a while, make sure that you also subscribe and hit the bell as well. Only about 30% of you all who are watching are actually subscribed, which if you're like me, there's a pretty good chance that you don't know that you're not subscribed, but it actually helps us out quite a bit. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice humans, and I'll see you soon. Bye.